The silver ship hung in Earth's orbit like a polished coin. Inside, Ambassador Trell looked at the blue planet through the view screen. He had seen many worlds, but there was something different about this one. The scans showed it was teeming with life, and the humans who lived there had built cities and machines. They had even sent small ships to their moon and nearby planets. But strangely, they still lived mainly on their home planet. "They call it Earth," said Vex, the team's life scientist. She flicked through data on her screen. "They have achieved space travel over 70 years ago, but they have not left their world in large numbers." Trell nodded slowly. "The Council finds this behavior primitive or foolish," added Orin, who stood with his arms crossed. As the security advisor, he always looked for weaknesses. Most species begin to leave their worlds once they learn how to travel in space. It is the natural path of progress. The Galactic Union had discovered Earth 6 months ago through routine scans of this part of space. The Union included over 30 species who had all followed the same path. They had built great ships and left their home planets behind. Some lived on huge space stations, others on new planets they had changed to suit them. None stayed on their first worlds. "Perhaps they have their reasons," Vex said, though she didn't sound convinced. Trell straightened his formal robes. As the chosen ambassador, it was his job to invite these humans to join the Union. He had done this many times before with other species. It usually went smoothly. Most were eager to join and learn from the more advanced cultures. "Prepare the landing craft," he ordered. "Let's not keep our new friends waiting." Down on Earth, Captain James Reeves stood on the landing pad with a small group of officials. The world had been preparing for this day for decades, the day aliens would finally arrive. When the strange ships appeared in orbit 3 days ago, there had been some panic, but mostly excitement. "Remember," Reed told his team, "we represent all of humanity now. Let's show them our best." The alien craft descended from the clouds, sleek and silent. It landed gently on the pad. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a door opened, and 3 figures emerged. They looked surprisingly similar to humans. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. But their skin had a faint blue tint, and their eyes were larger, with no whites, just deep purple color all the way across. Trell stepped forward first. "Greetings, people of Earth. I am Ambassador Trell of the Galactic Union. We come in peace and friendship." Reed nodded and stepped forward too. "I am Captain James Reed of the United Earth Space Command. On behalf of humanity, we welcome you to Earth." The formal greetings continued, and soon they moved inside to a conference room prepared for this historic meeting. The aliens sat on one side, the humans on the other. "Your world is interesting," Trell said, looking around. "From our scans, we see you have achieved spaceflight, yet you remain bound to your planet. This is unusual." Reed smiled politely, but he caught the slight tone in Trell's voice. It wasn't quite mockery, but close to it. The kind of tone used when speaking to a child. "We have ventures on our moon and Mars," Reed replied calmly, "but Earth remains our home." "Most species outgrow their first planets," Orin cut in. "The resources run low. The population grows too large. The natural path is to expand outward. We prefer to think of it as taking care of what we have," Reed said. Trell nodded with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, each species develops in its own way. The Union welcomes diversity." He placed a small device on the table that projected a star map. "We have come to formally invite Earth to join the Galactic Union. We can help you catch up to the others." Reed nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the clear condescension. "We're honored by your invitation, Ambassador. We have much to discuss and learn from each other." "Indeed," Trell replied. "I believe you have much to learn from us." The alien embassy floated on the ocean, halfway between North America and Europe. It was a marvel of engineering. A gleaming structure that rose from the water like a silver lotus. The aliens had built it in just 3 days, showing off their advanced technology. Captain Reed stood on the observation deck, watching the waves crash against the base of the structure. It had been 2 weeks since first contact. The initial excitement had given way to a steady stream of meetings, cultural exchanges, and negotiations. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Trell appeared beside him, his purple eyes reflecting the sunrise. Yes, it is, Reed answered. Though I'm surprised you chose to build your embassy on water rather than land. Neutral territory, Trell explained. We noticed your world is divided into nations. We didn't want to show favoritism. He paused. Though I must admit, your oceans are much cleaner than I expected for a world with such industry. Reed nodded. We learned from our past mistakes. 200 years ago, our oceans were dying. We changed our ways. They walked together along the deck. Today was important. Reed had been officially assigned as the human liaison to Trell's team. The real work would begin now. Inside the meeting room, Vex and Orin waited with several screens showing images of vast space structures. These are some of our Union worlds, Trell said proudly as the screens displayed massive habitat rings orbiting stars and planets covered in city lights. Each species has left their original world behind. The Lyran left their planet over 800 years ago. The Maver did it in less than 50 years after achieving spaceflight. Reed studied the images carefully. And your original world? Trell's expression changed slightly. We left it 400 years ago. It had served its purpose. We had used up what we needed and moved on to greater things. Is that the normal path for species in the Union? Reed asked. Of course, Orin cut in. Why cling to one rock when the universe offers billions? It's the mark of an advanced civilization to spread outward, not to remain trapped by gravity and sentiment. Reed noticed the judgment in Orin's voice but remained calm. We see things differently. Earth isn't just a rock to us. So your people are content to stay here? Vex asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. What about expansion? Population growth? We have our moon base, Mars colonies, and orbital habitats, Reed explained. But Earth remains our home, our heart. We expand carefully, sustainably. Trell looked unconvinced. Perhaps you need to see how the Union truly lives. We could arrange a tour of our main worlds. I appreciate the offer, Reed replied. But first, I'd like to show you more of Earth. You've only seen this embassy and a few meeting rooms. There's much more to understand about why we choose to stay. Orin snorted softly. More concrete cities and polluted air, I imagine. Actually, Reed said with a small smile, I was thinking something quite different. A global tour, starting tomorrow. If you truly want to understand humans, you need to see our world as we see it. The aliens exchanged glances. Finally, Trell nodded. Very well. A brief tour might be educational, though I doubt it will change our understanding of your situation. The next day, they began in New York City. The aliens walked through the crowded streets, observing the humans with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled superiority. So many people packed together, Vex noted, watching the crowds in Times Square. And the buildings reached so high. Efficient use of limited space, Reed explained. Though we have plenty of open land too. Primitive transportation, Orin muttered as they watched the subway entrances. Ground vehicles burning fossil fuels. Some older areas still use them, Reed admitted. But most of our transport is clean energy now. We preserve some historical systems for their cultural value. As they moved through the city, Reed could sense their judgment. The aliens saw exactly what they expected to see. A species trapped on their world, building upward because they couldn't move outward. That evening, as they prepared to leave for the next destination, Trell approached Reed. Your cities are impressive for planetary constructions, but surely you see the limitations. Reed smiled. Tomorrow, Captain. Tomorrow you'll start to see something different. Reed's small aircraft flew low over the Grand Canyon. The morning sun cast long shadows across the vast gorge, painting the rock layers in shades of red, orange, and gold. He watched the aliens' faces as they peered out the windows. For once, they were silent. "We call this the Grand Canyon," Reed said. "It was carved by a river over millions of years. It's over a mile deep in some places." Vex pressed her face closer to the glass. "And this is natural, not made by humans." "Completely natural," Reed confirmed, "though we preserve it carefully now." The aircraft landed on a small pad near the rim. As they stepped out, the vast space opened before them. Even Orin seemed impressed by the scale of it. "This is just the beginning," Reed told them. "Today we see Earth's wonders." Over the next 12 hours, their craft took them around the globe. They hovered over the thundering Victoria Falls, the water creating rainbows in the mist. They landed beside the crystal blue waters of the Great Barrier Reef, where Vex actually gasped when she put on a diving mask and saw the colors and creatures below the surface. "So many different life forms," she exclaimed when they returned to the aircraft. "I've never seen such biodiversity in one ecosystem. Our records show most planets only develop a fraction of this variety." "The Amazon is next," Reed said, checking his watch. "The largest rainforest on Earth." As they flew over the endless green canopy, Trell's expression changed. He had been quiet most of the day, watching carefully. "How much of your planet remains in this natural state?" he finally asked. "About 40% is protected wilderness now," Reed answered. "It wasn't always that way. 200 years ago, we almost lost many of these places to development and pollution. We came close to making the same mistake your people did." Trell looked at him sharply. "What mistake?" "Using up a world before understanding its value," Reed said quietly. The aircraft landed in a small clearing. They walked along a path into the dense forest. The sounds surrounded them: birds calling, insects buzzing, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. "The air is so rich here," Vex noted, using her scanner. "The oxygen content is high, and there are compounds in the air I've never seen before." "The trees produce them," Reed explained. "Many of our medicines come from plants found only in forests like this one." "And you just leave it all here?" Orin asked, sounding genuinely confused. "All these resources?" "We harvest sustainably," Reed said. "We take what we need without destroying the source. That's the difference in our approach." As the day continued, they visited the ice sheets of Antarctica, the deep sea vents of the Pacific, and finally the African savanna at sunset. A herd of elephants moved slowly across the golden plain as the sun sank toward the horizon. "On our homeworld," Trell said suddenly, "we had animals similar to these. They're gone now. Everything is gone." "What happened?" Reed asked gently. "Progress," Trell replied, but his voice held something new. A hint of regret. "We mined the mountains, drained the seas, cleared the forests. By the time we achieved spaceflight, there was little left that was natural. We thought it was the price of advancement." Night fell as they stood on a hillside in Kenya. Above them, the stars emerged, brilliant in the clear air. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. Vex looked up in wonder. "The stars are so bright here." "No light pollution," Reed explained. "We keep some places dark, to see the stars as our ancestors did. We haven't seen stars like this since our ancestors left our homeworld," Orin admitted, his usual harshness gone from his voice. They stood in silence for a while, watching the night sky. Finally, Trell turned to Reed. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "there is more to learn about Earth than I first thought." Reed nodded but said nothing. The change had begun. Tomorrow would bring more understanding, but tonight, under the stars, was a moment of connection that needed no words. "This is the North Pole Research Station," Reed explained as they stepped out of the transport. The bitter cold hit them immediately, the wind whipping snow across the landing pad. "Humans have lived and worked here for over 100 years." Trell and his team pulled their thermal suits tighter. The suits had been provided by the humans, designed specifically for the alien physiology. Despite the advanced materials, Oren still shivered. Why would anyone choose to live in such harsh conditions? He asked through chattering teeth. To learn, to explore, to test ourselves, Reed answered, leading them toward the main building. This is one of Earth's most extreme environments. If we can adapt to this, we can adapt to almost anything. Inside the research station, they met Dr. Anna White, the station chief. She showed them labs where scientists studied climate, ice cores, and atmospheric changes. The aliens watched with growing interest as the humans moved efficiently through their work, completely at home in this frozen world. And all of this technology was developed just for this environment. Vex asked, examining equipment for deep ice drilling. Yes, Dr. White replied. We developed specific tools for specific challenges. What works here might not work in the desert. The desert? Trell asked. Reed smiled. Our next stop. 6 hours later, they stood under the blazing sun of the Sahara. The temperature had jumped nearly 80 degrees from their last location. They toured a massive solar farm, its panels following the sun like metallic flowers. This farm powers 3 major cities, explained the facility director. We've learned to harness the desert's greatest resource, constant sunlight. Oren walked between the panel rows, studying their design. Your technology is less advanced than ours, but more specialized to your environment. Exactly, Reed said. We don't just use generic solutions. We adapt our technology to each unique place. Their next stop was even more surprising, an underwater research habitat off the coast of Australia. They traveled down in a sleek submersible, descending through crystal blue waters until they reached a complex of interconnected domes on the ocean floor. Humans live down here? Vex asked as they docked. For how long? Our current team has been here for 8 months, Reed explained. They're studying ocean ecosystems and developing new medicines from marine organisms. Inside the habitat, the aliens met researchers who showed them labs, living quarters, and hydroponic gardens. Through the thick viewports, colorful fish swam by, occasionally pausing to study the strange visitors. I'm starting to understand, Trell said quietly to Reed as they watched a researcher work. Your people haven't stayed on Earth because you can't leave. You've stayed because you are still exploring it. Reed nodded. Earth is our training ground. We face every extreme here before we challenge the stars. Each environment teaches us something different about adaptation and survival. Later, as they returned to the surface, Reed revealed something that clearly surprised the aliens. We do have colonies on Mars, Luna, and several orbital habitats. We've been expanding into space for decades. But you told us humans primarily live on Earth, Oren said, looking confused. We do, by choice, Reed emphasized. Our colonies are thriving, but Earth remains our heart. We don't abandon worlds. We learn from them, heal them, and then carefully expand outward. In their aircraft once more, Trell seemed deep in thought. Finally, he spoke. In the Union, most species have lost their connection to their original environments. Many have lived for generations in controlled habitats. The skills to adapt to different conditions, those have faded. That sounds limiting, Reed observed. It is, Vex admitted. On our habitat ship, environmental conditions never change. There are no seasons, no weather variations. It's always perfect. Perhaps too perfect, Trell murmured. Humans face Earth's challenges daily, Reed said. Storms, earthquakes, climate shifts. We've learned to be flexible, to improvise. Those qualities serve us well in space too. Oren had been unusually quiet. Now he looked at Reed with new respect. You test yourselves against Earth before you challenge the stars, he said, repeating Reed's words. That's not primitive at all. It's strategic. Reed smiled as their craft banked toward their next destination. The aliens were beginning to see. Earth wasn't humanity's cage. It was their greatest teacher. The urgent message came while they were touring a rainforest restoration project in Brazil. A junior officer from Trell's ship appeared as a hologram in the middle of their group, his blue face tight with worry. "Ambassador Trell, we have an emergency transmission from the Union Council," the officer said. "Priority 1. Trell's expression changed instantly. He excused himself and stepped away with the hologram. The other aliens followed, leaving Reed standing with the project scientists. Something was wrong. When Trell returned, his purple eyes were dark with concern. "We need to return to our ship immediately," he said. "There's been an attack." The flight back to the embassy was tense and silent. Once there, they gathered in the secure communication room, where a large screen showed a star map of the Galactic Union. Several systems on the outer edge were flashing red. "The Scourge has breached our border defenses," Trell explained, his voice grave. 3 outer worlds have already fallen. The Union is mobilizing all available ships. "Who are the Scourge?" Reed asked. "A species from beyond known space," Vex said quietly. "They don't communicate or negotiate. They simply take what they want. They move from system to system, stripping planets of resources and moving on," Orin added. "They're not interested in territory, only consumption." Trell turned to Reed. "I have orders to evacuate this system immediately. The Union cannot spare ships to defend an unaligned world, especially one as resource-rich as Earth. The Scourge will be drawn to it." Reed shook his head. "Earth isn't joining any evacuation. This is our home. We'll defend it." The aliens exchanged looks. "You don't understand," Trell said slowly. "The Scourge technology is far beyond yours. Their ships would tear through your defenses in hours." "We've faced threats before," Reed replied calmly. "We'll face this one too." Orin actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Your bravery is admirable, but misplaced, Captain. Your most advanced weapons are toys compared to Union standard armaments, let alone Scourge technology." Reed's eyes narrowed. "Then perhaps you should see what toys we have before you dismiss them." 2 hours later, their shuttle was approaching a massive space station in Earth orbit. It was one of 12 similar stations positioned strategically around the planet. "This is Guardian Station 4, Reed explained as they docked. "Part of Earth's defense network." Inside, they were met by General Laura Chen, who led them through busy corridors filled with uniformed personnel. "We've been monitoring your situation," she told Trell. "Our deep space sensors detected the Scourge fleet 3 days ago." Trell looked surprised. "Your sensors reached that far?" "And farther," Chen replied. "We've been watching the outer systems for decades." They entered a vast control room where holographic displays showed Earth, its orbital stations, and the surrounding space up to the edge of the solar system. Red dots mark the approaching Scourge fleet. "Current estimate is they'll reach our outer system in 8 days, Chen said. "We're already deploying our first line of defenses." Orin studied the displays with growing confusion. "These defensive capabilities, they're far more advanced than our scans indicated." "We keep some things private," Reed said simply. Chen led them to another section, where they could see a hangar filled with sleek fighters and larger battle cruisers. "Our fleet may be smaller than the Union's, but it's designed specifically for Earth's defense." "How many ships do you have?" Vex asked. "In total, about 800 combat-ready vessels," Chen answered, "plus the orbital platforms and planetary shields." "Planetary shields?" Trell asked sharply. "That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would be massive." Reed finished for him. "Yes, that's why we've spent 50 years building a global network of power stations. Earth's geothermal and tidal energy is harnessed to power our shields." Chen turned to face the aliens directly. "We don't need evacuation, Ambassador. What we could use is information. Anything you can tell us about Scourge tactics and weaknesses would be helpful." Trell looked at the humans with new eyes. The primitives who clung to their planet had been preparing for this moment all along. "I'm facing a difficult choice," he said finally. "My orders are to leave. But perhaps there is another option. One that might benefit us both." The war room inside Guardian Station 4 hummed with activity. Holographic displays showed the solar system and the approaching Scourge fleet. 3 days had passed since Trell's decision to stay and help. The Union Council had been furious, but eventually agreed to send a small defensive fleet to support Earth. "The Scourge will reach Jupiter's orbit in 18 hours, Chen announced to the gathered commanders. "Our outer system defenses are ready." Reed stood beside Trell, watching the Union officers study the human battle plans with growing interest. "Your strategy is unusual," Trell noted. "The Union typically forms defensive lines in open space to repel attackers. Fighting in open space gives the advantage to whoever has more ships or bigger guns," Reed explained. "We don't have either, so we fight differently." The plan was daring. Rather than meeting the Scourge head-on, Earth's forces would use the solar system itself as a weapon. Fighters hidden in Jupiter's rings, battle cruisers concealed in the atmospheres of gas giants, stealth platforms disguised as asteroids. The entire system had been turned into an ambush zone. "They won't expect it," Oren admitted. "The Scourge are used to facing organized opposition. Not whatever this is." For once, his voice held respect rather than disdain. The next day, the battle began. The Scourge ships entered the outer system. Dark, jagged vessels that moved with frightening speed. They headed straight for the inner planets, ignoring the apparent emptiness around them. "They're not even scanning for defenses," Vex observed from her station. "They're completely confident." "That confidence is about to cost them," Chen replied. She nodded to her communications officer. "All units, execute Operation Hornet's Nest." The trap was sprung. From hiding places throughout the system, Earth's ships emerged. They attacked in small, coordinated groups, striking and then disappearing back into planetary rings or asteroid fields. The Scourge formation broke apart as they tried to chase down the nimble human vessels. "Amazing," Trell whispered as he watched the tactical display. "They're fighting like Earth's predators. Wolves, lions, sharks. Pack tactics." On the main viewer, the battle raged around Jupiter. A group of Scourge ships chased human fighters into the giant planet's atmosphere, only to be caught in powerful storms that the humans had learned to navigate long ago. "We use the environment," Reed explained, "just like we've always done on Earth." The Union ships arrived, taking defensive positions around Mars. They fought with precision and power, but their rigid formations contrasted sharply with the fluid human tactics. For 3 days, the battle continued throughout the solar system. The Scourge lost ship after ship to the unexpected strategies, but they were powerful and numerous. Despite heavy losses, a significant portion of their fleet broke through to Earth orbit. "Final defense positions," Chen ordered as alarms blared through the station. "Planetary shield activation in 3 minutes." Reed and Trell moved to the main viewing area where they could see Earth below. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, blue and white and beautiful. "They're launching their final assault," Oren reported, watching the tactical display. Over 200 ships approaching Earth. "Shields at full power," a technician called out. "Ready on your command." Chen looked at Reed, who nodded. "Activate planetary defense system," she ordered. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, starting at the poles, a shimmering blue energy field began to spread across the planet. Within seconds, Earth was enclosed in a translucent shield. The Scourge fired their main weapons, beams of searing energy that had destroyed countless worlds. They struck Earth's shield and scattered, dissipating into harmless light. "Impossible," whispered an officer from Trell's ship. "No planetary shield could withstand that kind of firepower." "Ours can," Reed said simply. "We've had generations to perfect it." The Scourge attacked again and again, but the shield held. Meanwhile, Earth's orbital stations fired upon the alien ships, while fighters darted between them in coordinated attacks. From the station window, Trell watched the battle unfold against the backdrop of the shielded Earth. His understanding of humans was changing by the minute. "You never needed our help," he said quietly to Reed. "You were ready for this all along." Reed's expression was grim but determined. "We've been preparing since we first looked to the stars. Earth taught us to be ready for anything." The battle for Earth lasted 3 more days. The Scourge fought with relentless determination, but they faced something they had never encountered before. A species fighting to protect its home, not just its existence. Eventually, the combined forces of Earth and the Union broke the back of the Scourge fleet. The remaining enemy ships retreated into deep space, vanishing as mysteriously as they had appeared. 2 weeks later, Reed stood on a hilltop overlooking San Francisco. Parts of the city showed damage from the few Scourge weapons that had penetrated the shields, but repair work was already well underway. Beside him stood Trell, Vex, and Orin, taking in the scene. "Your people rebuild quickly," Trell observed. "We've had practice," Reed replied. "Earthquakes, floods, storms. Earth has always challenged us. We've learned to recover." In the harbor below, a Union ship landed near a human vessel. The 2 crews mingled, exchanging knowledge and stories. Since the battle, relationships between humans and the Union species had changed dramatically. "The Union Council has sent a formal message," Trell said, handing Reed a small device. "They're officially recognizing Earth as a living heritage world. It's the highest status they can give to a planet." Reed smiled. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means," Vex explained, "that the Union now recognizes the value of what you've done here. Preserving a living, thriving homeworld is now seen as an achievement, not a limitation." The device projected images of other worlds, the abandoned homeworlds of Union species. Many were barren, strip-mined, or covered in endless city sprawl. A few showed small areas of restoration work. "Several species have requested permission to visit Earth," Orin added. "They want to learn how to restore their own homeworlds. Some are even talking about returning to them." Reed looked surprised. "Really? After all this time?" "The battle showed everyone something important," Trell said. "Earth wasn't just your home. It was your strength. The connection between humans and your planet gave you advantages we had lost. Your adaptability, your understanding of natural systems, your ability to use your environment. We saw it in how you fought," Orin added with newfound respect. "You didn't just deploy weapons. You used the whole solar system as your ally." They walked down the hill toward the city. People were working in community gardens that had been expanded after the battle, growing food and bringing more green spaces into the urban environment. "The Union has existed for over 3,000 years, Trell continued. "In all that time, we've been moving forward, outward, always seeking the next world, the next resource. We never looked back. Until now," Vex said softly. A group of children ran past them, laughing as they played in a park. Above them, birds flew between new trees planted to replace those lost in the battle. "What will you do now?" Reed asked. Trell looked out over the bay, where the first stars were becoming visible in the evening sky. "I've requested a new assignment. The Union is forming a homeworld restoration initiative. They've asked me to lead it." "With my help," Vex added. "There's so much we've forgotten about living with a planet rather than just on it." "And you, Orin?" Reed asked. "Still think we're primitive for staying on one world?" Orin actually smiled. "A rare sight. I think I was the primitive one, Captain. The Union military has asked me to study your defensive tactics. Your planet-bound thinking created strategies our advanced military never imagined." As night fell, they reached the shore. The lights of the city reflected in the water, mirroring the stars above. Ships from Earth and the Union moved through the bay, working together on recovery efforts. "We thought we were teaching you," Trell said quietly. "But you were the teachers all along." Reed shook his head. "We're all learning. That's what Earth taught us, to never stop learning, adapting, growing. The universe has much to teach all of us. A shooting star streaked across the sky. For a moment, they stood in silence, four beings from different worlds united by a new understanding. Perhaps, Trell said finally, the greatest journey isn't to the stars, but learning to truly call a planet home. Reed smiled. Welcome home, then, all of you. The Earth turned, as it always had, carrying them all toward a new dawn.